Hello, friends. Night has already fallen, and the day was long and tiring. And now, it is time to rest. As always, I will tell you a kind legend that once took place in our beloved Middle-earth. So, settle in comfortably, gently close your eyes, and let our journey begin. The fire crackled low in the great hall of Erebor. Outside, snow drifted softly down the slopes of the lonely mountain, settling upon its blackened stones like a shroud of white. Winter had come early that year, and though the forges burned bright again, the hearts of the dwarves were still mending from the wounds of war. Dwalin, son of Fundin, sat near the hearth, his hands folded upon the haft of his axe. The light gleamed on the runes carved into its head, each stroke a memory from the long years of toil and battle. He had fought beside Thorin Oakenshield and buried him under stone. He had seen Smaug's ruin and the host of 5 armies clashing on the field. Yet for all the gold and glory restored to the mountain, there was unrest in his heart. The halls echoed with new laughter, but Dwalin heard beneath it a note of weariness. Erebor had risen again, true, but beyond its gates the north still slept uneasy. Old evils never perished easily, and the mountains had long memories. One night, as he walked the rebuilt corridors, a messenger from the Iron Hills arrived, his beard stiff with frost, his eyes wide with fear. He brought troubling news. A caravan of dwarves, laden with silver and tools from the forges of Dine Ironfoot, had vanished while crossing the high pass. They were last seen near the old road that led toward Mount Gundabad, the ancient citadel of the Orcs. The hall fell silent when the words were spoken. Gundabad was a name that drew no cheer among Durin's folk. It was once theirs in the elder days, one of the first great halls of the dwarves. But it had long been defiled by orcs, and worse. Even after the fall of Orzog and Bolg, none had dared to reclaim it. King Dain listened gravely, his hand resting on the arm of his stone throne. "The north stirs again," he said at last, "and if Gundabad is awake, we must know by whose hand." Then Dwalin rose, his shadow falling long across the hall. "I will go," he said. His voice carried the weight of oath and steel. "The road through the high pass was my road once, and I have crossed it under darker skies. If our kin are lost, I will find them, or what remains of them." Dain regarded him for a moment, sorrow flickering in his eyes. "You have fought enough wars for a lifetime, Dwalin, son of Fundin. Will you not rest while the mountain heals?" "I will rest," Dwalin replied quietly, "when the north is silent and the dark no longer whispers in my dreams." So it was that within a day, Dwalin gathered a company, 5 dwarves in all. There was Bruni, stout and eager, who had never seen battle but swung a hammer like thunder. Old Ofar, who had served Thorin's kin in exile. Young Tovi, quick-eyed and fleet-footed, who carried a bow instead of an axe. And twins, Bofri and Borin, whose laughter could chase away fear itself. They set out beneath a pale dawn, the gates of Erebor opening before them like the mouth of an old dragon. Behind them, the mountain loomed golden under the first rays of the sun. Before them stretched the long road through Dale, past the desolation and into the wild white silence of the north. For many days they marched beneath the shadow of the grey mountains. The wind howled and snow drifted deep in the gullies. At night they camped beside frozen streams, telling tales of the old days to keep the chill from their bones. Yet always, Dwalin felt something watching from afar, a weight in the dark, a presence that did not belong to wind or stone. On the 7th night, as they neared the high pass, they found the first sign, A wagon, half buried in snow, its wheels splintered. The tracks of ponies vanished into the drifts, but beside them lay black-feathered arrows, the kind not made by dwarven hands. Bruni cursed under his breath. "Orcs!" he spat. "I thought they were scattered after the war." "So did I," said Dwalin grimly, kneeling to study the arrow. Its shaft was crude, yet the iron head bore strange markings, symbols burned into the metal itself, but these are not of Azog's making. Something new commands them. Offa crossed himself in the dwarven fashion. Then the rumors are true. Gundabad breathes again. They pressed on the next day, climbing higher into the mountains. Snow fell thick, veiling the world in white silence. By noon the sky had turned to ash, and thunder rolled far away. When they reached the pass, the storm broke upon them in fury. Lightning flared across the peaks, and in that brief flash, Dwalin saw movement. Figures on the ridge above, crouched against the wind. Not men, not dwarves. The glint of eyes, yellow and cruel. "Down!" he roared. An instant later, arrows hissed through the snowstorm. The dwarves rolled behind a boulder, shields raised. "Hold fast!" Dwalin shouted. "They mean to drive us back!" But retreat was not in him. The old fire stirred once more. With a cry, he leapt from cover, axe in hand, and charged up the slope. Shapes burst from the mist. Orcs, their armor pieced together from bone and rusted iron. Dwalin's axe rose and fell, cleaving through helm and hide. The snow turned red beneath his boots. The others fought beside him, the twins shouting their war song as they struck. Bruni's hammer shattered a shield. Tovi's arrow found a throat. When the last foe fell, the mountain was still again, save for the wind and the slow drip of melting snow. Dwalin stood among the bodies, breathing hard. Then he froze. The slain orcs bore not the mark of Gundabad, nor of any known tribe. Instead, upon their flesh was a strange brand. A crescent burned deep into the skin, black as pitch, cold as iron. Dwalin's frown deepened. "This is new craft," he murmured. "Dark work." Ulfar glanced nervously at the sky. "What does it mean?" "It means," Dwalin said, tightening his grip on his axe, "that there's something worse than orcs abroad in these mountains, and we've only just begun to find its trail." The storm howled louder, as if in answer. The company gathered their packs and pressed onward, unaware that far above them, deep in the heart of Mount Gundabad, a pale light flickered, cold and watchful. And something in the dark began to stir. The storm did not abate for 2 days and nights. Snow fell in thick sheets, burying all signs of battle beneath a pale and silent shroud. The company found a shallow cave in the mountainside where they could take shelter, and there they lit a small fire, shielding its glow with their cloaks, lest unfriendly eyes see it from afar. Dwalin sat at the mouth of the cave, his back to the rock. He had cleaned his axe, though the edge was nicked from hard use. His thoughts were not at rest. The strange crescent brands upon the orc's flesh troubled him deeply. Orcs had no love of symbols, save those their masters forced upon them. The mark seemed fresh, burned deep with cruel fire. Whoever had branded them had done so with purpose. Behind him, the others tried to rest. Borin and Bofri murmured softly over their ration packs, trying to lift the mood with some jest or song, but even their laughter faltered in the cold air. Tovi kept watch beside the fire, fletching new arrows with trembling hands. Only old Ulfar seemed calm, his eyes half closed, whispering to himself an old dwarvish prayer to Mahul, the maker of stone. When dawn broke, a grey, cheerless dawn, they set out once more. The storm had thinned, leaving a pale mist that clung to the cliffs like breath from some sleeping beast. Step by step they climbed, until the high pass opened before them, a narrow ledge between two towering peaks. From there they could see far to the north, a vast, white wilderness broken only by black ridges and shadowed valleys. And there, like a fang rising from the earth, stood Mount Gundabad. Even at that distance, it seemed alive with menace. Its upper slopes were scarred with black veins where the snow would not lie, and clouds coiled about its crown as though unwilling to part. Borin spat into the snow. "By Durin's beard," he muttered, "I'd sooner face a dragon than set foot in that place." Dwalin's eyes narrowed. "Then you shall have courage enough for both of us. We go on." They descended from the pass into the northern vales, moving by hidden paths that few outside the dwarves knew. But the further they went, the more signs they found. Shattered tools, torn banners, the carcasses of pack ponies. At one point, they came upon a broken cart lodged in a stream bed. The iron wheels were crushed, and the ice around it was stained dark. Ofar knelt beside it and found a dwarven brooch half buried in the slush, a silver clasp shaped like a hammer. "Made in the Iron Hills," he said softly. This was one of Dain's caravans, no doubt. Dwalin took it from him, his fingers tightening around the cold metal. "Aye," he said, "and not long ago." He turned his gaze toward Gundabad. "We are close now." That night they made camp in the ruins of an old watchtower, one of many that had once guarded the northern marches in the elder days, before the orcs had come. The stones were half buried, but in the dim light of their fire, they could still make out the carvings of runes upon the lintel. "Durin's mark," murmured Bruni in awe. So this was truly our kin's land. Dwalin traced the runes with his gloved hand. The letters were worn but still proud, carved deep. "Here stands the line of the north, where Durin's folk kept watch." He sighed, low and grim. "Aye, once we were strong in these mountains. Now only ghosts keep watch." They ate in silence that night, the wind keening through the broken stones. In the small hours when all others slept, Dwalin rose and walked a short distance from the camp. The snow had ceased, and the moon hung pale behind a thin veil of cloud. All was quiet, yet he felt it again. That same presence as before, distant but aware. He turned sharply, scanning the darkness, his hand on his axe. Nothing stirred, only the whisper of the wind across the drifts. Then, faintly, he heard it, a sound not of nature, a deep, slow rhythm, like breath drawn through stone. He froze, straining to listen. It came from far below, beneath the ground. One long sigh, then silence. When morning came, he told no one what he had heard. There was no need to fill their hearts with unease. They had enough of that already. The path wound steeply downward, and by midday, the company reached the foothills of Gundabad. Here the snow gave way to black rock. The air itself seemed thicker, foul with a tang of smoke and iron. Once, these lands had been fair, pine-clad ridges and clear streams, but now they were broken, scarred by the years of orcish dominion. As they approached, Dwalin saw that the old road to Gundabad still remained, a great causeway of stone leading up to the mountain's gate. But it was cracked and sunken in places, and strange bones lay scattered along its edge. They advanced warily, weapons ready. From time to time they found the marks of booted feet, fresh, many of them. The orcs had returned indeed. At last they reached a narrow gorge that opened before the mountain's face. There they found what they sought, and feared. Half buried in the ice were the remains of the missing caravan. Wagons overturned, their cargo scattered and looted. Frozen dwarves lay where they had fallen, their faces pale and still beneath frost. The company stood in silence. None spoke for a long while. Dwalin knelt beside one of the fallen and brushed away the snow. He knew the face, a trader named Fror, who had once shared ale with him in Erebor. His hand still clutched the haft of a broken axe. "They fought well," murmured Ofar. "They died alone," Dwalin said. He rose, his face hardening. "We bury them before we move on." They worked in grim silence, digging through frozen ground until at last the dead were laid to rest beneath cairns of stone. Dwalin placed Fror's axe atop the highest mound. "Sleep well, brother," he said softly. "Your battle is ended." But even as they worked, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. When they turned toward the mountain, they saw dark shapes shifting among the rocks high above, too distant to strike, but not hiding. Watching. Waiting. "They want us to come," said Tovi uneasily. Dwalin nodded. "Then let us not disappoint them." By nightfall, they stood at the threshold of Gundabad. The gate loomed before them, a vast arch of black stone carved with runes long defaced. The darkness beyond seemed to breathe. "Once, this was the northern crown of Durin's people," said Ofar, his voice almost reverent. "Now it is a tomb." Dwalin stepped forward. "Then we shall see what ghosts dwell in this tomb." He raised his torch high and entered. The others followed, their lights flickering against the vast pillars of the entrance hall. The air was thick and cold. Everywhere lay the marks of battle, shattered bones, broken blades, old armor rusted into the rock. And there, far ahead, the passage divided. One tunnel leading upward toward the old halls, the other sloping down into blackness. Upon the stone beside the lower way, Dwalin saw again the same mark burned deep into the wall, the crescent, black as soot. Bruni swallowed hard. "The night side," he whispered. Dwalin looked into the dark and felt the weight of ages pressing down upon him. "Aye," he said at last, "that's where we're bound." The torches flared, casting long, wavering shadows across the ancient stone. And together, the company of 5 descended into the deep places of Gundabad, into the night side, where no light had shone for an age. The stairway into the depths wound downward in a long spiral, its steps hewn from black stone that glittered faintly under torchlight. The air grew colder with every turn, until their breath hung in white mist before their faces. The echo of their boots on stone seemed swallowed almost at once, as if the mountain itself were drinking the sound. None spoke. The silence was a living thing down there, thick and heavy. Even the bravest of them, Bruni with his restless courage, or the laughing twins, kept their eyes fixed ahead, unwilling to look too long into the dark that pressed close about them. At last, the stair ended in a great hall whose ceiling was lost in shadow. Pillars of ancient craft lined the walls, their surfaces scarred by deep gashes and black scorch marks. Old banners, grey with age, hung in tatters from the vaults. The smell of damp stone and rust filled the air. "This was a forge hall once," Ofar murmured, holding his torch aloft. "See the channels cut for the bellows, and the drains for molten ore. Durin's kin shaped wonders here in elder days." "Now it's naught but ruin," said Dwalin. He ran his hand over the edge of a fallen anvil. Still the craft was strong. Even ruin holds its beauty. They moved through the hall, their torches flickering against the carved walls. Strange shadows seemed to flit across the far end of the chamber, where the light could not quite reach. Every so often, the faint sound of water dripping echoed like the ticking of some unseen clock. Then, as they neared an arched doorway, Tovi froze and lifted his hand. "Wait," he whispered. From beyond the arch came a faint, scraping sound, metal against stone, slow and deliberate. The company drew close together, weapons ready. The scraping stopped. "Who goes there?" Dwalin called. His voice rang through the cavern, bold and steady, though his eyes never left the darkness ahead. No answer came, only the faint whisper of air through unseen cracks. Dwalin took a step forward, raising his torch. The light touched the threshold and revealed a shape crouched just beyond it. It was a dwarf, or what had once been one. The corpse sat slumped against the wall, its mail corroded, beard stiff with dust. A broken sword lay across its knees, and beside it, scratched into the stone in jagged lines, were the same black crescent marks. Dozens of them. Bruni's voice trembled. "By the forge. How long has he been here?" Ofar bent closer, frowning. "Years, perhaps. Decades. This place must have been abandoned long before the war of the dwarves and orcs. Yet these marks, these are newer. They were made after he fell," Dwalin said grimly. "Someone, or something, found him here." He straightened, his torchlight glancing off the crescent carvings. They seemed to shimmer faintly, as though absorbing the light. Tovi swallowed. "There's sorcery in this." Dwalin said nothing, but he felt it too. The air seemed colder near the marks, the shadows thicker. They pressed onward through the doorway, into a passage that sloped deeper still. The tunnel was narrow and close, the stone walls slick with moisture. Their torches hissed and guttered, as if the darkness itself fought to smother them. The deeper they went, the more the mountain seemed alive. Sometimes the stone beneath their feet trembled faintly, or the walls gave a deep groan like some ancient beast shifting in its sleep. After what felt like hours, the tunnel opened suddenly into a vast cavern. The sight before them made even Dwalin pause. The chamber was immense, larger than the great hall of Erebor. Its roof was lost in darkness, but a faint red glow flickered far below, where cracks in the stone revealed molten veins that still pulsed like fire beneath the mountain's skin. Bridges of black rock spanned the chasm, leading toward a massive doorway on the far side, and all along the bridges figures moved. Orcs, dozens of them. But these were not like the rabble they had fought in the snow. They moved in eerie silence, their armor dark and gleaming, their faces hidden by crude masks shaped like snarling beasts. Each bore upon his breast a painted crescent, black and glimmering faintly red in the glow from below. The company drew back into shadow, hearts pounding. "Too many," murmured Tovi. "Far too many." Bruni's hand tightened on his hammer. "We should strike before they see us." "No," Dwalin whispered. "We learn first what they serve." From across the bridge, a new sound arose, a low chant, harsh and guttural. The orcs turned and knelt as one, facing the great door. A shape emerged from the darkness beyond it, tall and thin, wrapped in tattered black robes that seemed to drink the light. In one hand, it held a staff of iron crowned with a shard of dull crystal. Its face was hidden beneath a hood, but as it moved, a cold wind swept the cavern, carrying a stench of decay and old magic. The being raised its staff, and the crystal burned with pale fire. The orcs bowed low, trembling. Then a voice spoke, deep and hollow, as if echoing from some other place. "Serve and be remade. Hate and be strong. The night awakens and all light shall fade." A ripple of sound passed through the orcs, half fear, half worship. Dwalin felt his blood run cold. This was no mere chieftain. Whatever this creature was, it wielded a power older than the orcs themselves. He turned to the others. "We've seen enough. Back. Quietly." But as they moved to withdraw, Tovi's foot slipped against loose stone. It clattered down the slope, striking a rock with a sharp crack. Every head turned towards them. The hooded figure lifted its staff, and a hiss like escaping steam filled the air. "Intruders," it whispered. "Dwarves." Before they could flee, a wave of freezing wind swept through the tunnel. The torches went out, plunging them into utter blackness. "Run!" Dwalin roared. They bolted back the way they'd come, the dark echoing with the pounding of boots and the guttural cries of pursuit. The orcs poured after them, their armor clattering, their eyes burning like coals. Dwalin led them through the twisting passage, striking sparks from his axe against the wall to guide their path. Behind him, Bruni swung his hammer blindly at the shapes that lunged from the dark, crushing skulls and shattering limbs. At last they burst into the forge hall where they had first entered. Dwalin spun, slamming his axe into a supporting pillar. The ancient stone cracked, and with a thunderous roar the archway collapsed, sealing the passage in a rain of rock and dust. They staggered back, coughing. The air was thick with grit. But for the moment, only for the moment, the noise of pursuit had ceased. Borin leaned against the wall, gasping. "By Durin's crown," he rasped. "What in the deep was that?" Dwalin's face was grim. Something that commands the darkness. Something that has claimed Gundabad for its own. Ofar's voice was low and fearful. A spirit, perhaps. A wraith left over from the wars of the north. There were many such things in the old days. Dwalin nodded slowly. "Aye, and now it wakes again." He looked back toward the fallen stone, where faint tremors still ran through the floor. "We've seen the night side, and what stirs within it. But our work's not done. We must find the heart of this place, and strike it down before it spreads." For a long moment, none answered. The shadows pressed close, and the torches flickered weakly in their hands. Then Bruni hefted his hammer and grinned through the soot. "Well then," he said, "if the dark wants a fight, it's found one." Dwalin smiled faintly, grim but proud. "So be it. We go on." And together they turned once more toward the blackness below, where the fire glow of the mountain's heart beckoned, and where the true battle for Gundabad was waiting. The mountain groaned around them, as if their intrusion had woken something vast and ancient from uneasy sleep. Dust drifted down from the vaults, and faint echoes of the collapse still shuddered through the stone. The air was thick and stale, tasting of ash and old iron. They rested a short while, for their strength was spent. But none dared to sleep. The memory of that pale, robed figure lingered before their eyes. The cold voice, the chanting orcs, the unnatural fire that burned in the crystal. When at last they rose to move again, Dwalin took the lead. His torchlight danced over the broken forge hall, casting long shadows that twisted upon the walls. "We cannot go back the way we came," he said. "The passage is buried. We must find another way out, or through." Bruni nodded, though his hand never left the haft of his hammer. "Then let it be through. I'd rather die swinging than crawling." They crossed the ruined chamber toward a narrow stair that led downward, half choked with rubble. The air grew hotter as they descended, thick with the scent of smoke and burnt metal. Soon they began to hear a low, steady rumble, like the deep breathing of the earth itself. At the foot of the stair, they came upon another hall, vast and dim, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the center yawned a pit of fire, a molten forge still burning from the heart of the mountain. Great chains hung from the darkness above, their links glowing faintly red where they dipped near the molten stone. Ofar gazed about in wonder. "The deep forges of Gundabad," he whispered. "I had thought them long destroyed. Durin's folk delved deep here. Too deep, perhaps." The floor was strewn with wreckage, anvils overturned, broken tools scattered like bones. But amid the ruin were signs of new use. Iron cauldrons, black and fresh forged, stood beside the flames. Crude weapons lay in heaps, and along one wall were cages, small, yet shaped to hold dwarves. Tovi's face went pale. "They've taken prisoners." Dwalin's jaw clenched. "Then we free them if they still live." They moved cautiously through the forge. The heat was fierce, sweat running down their faces beneath their helms. From deeper within the shadows came the faint sound of movement. Chains rattling, a low groan. "Hold your torches low," Dwalin murmured. "Let us not announce ourselves too soon." They reached the cages. Within, 2 dwarves lay bound in chains, their faces gaunt and pale, their beards matted with grime. When the torchlight touched them, one stirred and raised his head weakly. "By the Maker," he rasped. "Dwalin!" Dwalin dropped to his knees beside the bars. Thrain's beard. It's Fror's brother, Dori. He seized the lock and wrenched at it, but the metal was thick and blackened by heat. "Borin, your tools!" With a grunt, Borin produced a short pry bar from his belt. The metal screamed as he forced it into the lock, and with a final heave, the door burst open. The other prisoner slumped forward, coughing. "Easy," Dwalin said, catching him. "You're safe now." Dori shook his head weakly. "Safe? Not here. You don't know what's down there, in the tunnels below the forges. It calls to them, the orcs. Calls them to serve." "What calls them?" asked Ofar. Dori's eyes darted toward the pit, the shadow beneath the mountain. It came when the forges were relit, a voice in the dark, offering strength, vengeance, gold. The fools listened. Now they serve it, as we were forced to serve them. A shiver ran through the company. Before Dwalin could answer, Bruni hissed sharply. "Someone's coming." They ducked into the shadows, just as a line of orcs entered the hall, dragging chains of glowing ore behind them. The heat didn't seem to touch them. Their eyes gleamed with that same unnatural light, the crescent mark painted across their faces. They muttered among themselves in their foul tongue, piling the ore beside the pit. Then, with a guttural chant, they cast it into the fire. The flames flared high and blue, and for an instant, a shape seemed to form within them, a tall, thin figure with outstretched arms, the same that Dwalin had seen before. The orcs knelt. "Hail the Night Sire!" they cried. "Hail the Master of the Hidden Flame!" Dwalin gripped his axe until the knuckles of his hand turned white. "Enough," he whispered. "This ends here." They struck as the orcs bowed low. Dwalin's axe came down like thunder, cleaving helm and skull. Bruni's hammer shattered bone. The twins fought side by side, driving their foes toward the pit. The hall filled with the clang of steel and the cries of battle. The freed dwarves seized fallen blades and joined the fray. Though weak, their fury burned bright. But victory came at a price. More orcs poured from the far tunnels, drawn by the sound. Arrows clattered off the walls, and one struck Tovi's shoulder, spinning him to the ground. "Back!" Dwalin shouted. "To the lift! There!" At the far end of the hall, a great platform hung by chains over a deep shaft. The company fought their way toward it, hacking through the press of enemies. Bruni stayed at the rear, fending off the orcs that swarmed behind. "Go!" he bellowed. "I'll hold them." Dwalin turned, fury flashing in his eyes. "You'll not die here, lad." But Bruni only grinned. "Then I'll see you below." With that, he swung his hammer into the chain supports, above the molten pit. The entire walkway shuddered and collapsed, carrying a dozen orcs screaming into the fire. Dwalin shouted his name, but the roar of flame drowned his voice. The others reached the lift and heaved at the chains. The platform shuddered and began to descend, creaking into the blackness below. They sank deep into the heart of the mountain, the light of the forge fading above them. None spoke. Bruni was gone, and the weight of it pressed on them all. At last the platform came to rest upon solid ground. The heat was gone now, replaced by chill air that stank of mold and ancient dust. Before them stretched a long corridor carved of black stone, the walls inscribed with runes so old even Ofar could not read them. Dwalin stepped off the lift and raised his torch. The flame flickered weakly, its light devoured by the shadows. "This is the night side," he said softly, "the heart of Gundabad." The corridor sloped gently downward, and as they advanced, faint lights began to glimmer on the walls, small crystals embedded in the stone, pulsing faintly like dying stars. They seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the earth. Dori walked beside Dwalin, his face pale. "It came from here," he murmured. The voice. We heard it whispering through the tunnels, even before the orcs built their altars. "Then we'll silence it," said Dwalin, "once and for all." At the corridor's end, they came upon a massive gate, twin doors of iron and obsidian. Upon their surface was carved a single crescent, vast and black, its edges rimmed with silver veins that glowed faintly. Dwalin stepped forward. The air grew heavy, pressing against his chest. From beyond the gate came a sound like the beating of a heart, slow, deep, and unholy. He raised his hand and touched the metal. It was cold as death. Then the gate shuddered, and from within came a whisper, soft, almost human. "Welcome, son of Fundin. You've come far to find me." The torches flickered violently, and the ground trembled underfoot. The voice was everywhere, in the stone, in the air, inside their minds. Dwalin stepped back, his eyes burning with defiance. "Show yourself, Shadow. Let me see the face of the thing that defiles my kin's hall." A laugh echoed in reply, low, cold, endless. And with that, the great gates of the night side began to open. The gates of iron and obsidian parted, with a sound like 1,000 knives drawn from sheaths, a long scraping shriek that echoed through the bones of the earth. Dust fell in thin streams from the arch above, and a gust of freezing air rolled out, carrying with it the stench of age and decay. The torches wavered and dimmed, as though the darkness itself drank their flame. Dwalin held his ground. His hand tightened around the haft of his axe, and his gaze did not falter. The others gathered close behind him, pale and silent. None spoke. The mountain seemed to hold its breath. Beyond the threshold stretched a vast cavern, unlike any they had seen before. Its walls were smooth as glass, as if carved not by chisel, but by fire. Rivers of shadow flowed along the ground like smoke, and faint lights glimmered here and there, reflections of some unseen flame deep below. And at the far end of the chamber, upon a dais of black stone, stood the thing that had called to them. It was tall and thin, draped in robes that seemed woven of mist and ashes. Its face was veiled, yet beneath the hood burned 2 points of pale fire, eyes without warmth, without mercy. In its hand, it held the staff crowned with the shard of crystal, which pulsed faintly like a dying heart. "You've come far, Dwalin of Erebor," it said. And though the words were soft, they carried through the vast hall like thunder. "You have fought the flame of Smaug, the wrath of Azog, and the despair of the dead. But none of those shadows were mine." "I know not your name, spirit," Dwalin said, his voice steady, though his heart pounded like a war drum. "But this hall belonged to Durin's folk, long before your kind crawled from the dark. You have no claim here." The figure tilted its head, and the faintest smile crept into its voice. "Durin's folk? Proud, stubborn creatures, always digging, always delving, never learning. Did you not wonder why your kings fell one by one to madness and greed? The dark was not your enemy. It was your inheritance. Lies, growled Dwalin. "Truth," hissed the voice, echoing from every wall. "I was here when the first pick struck stone in these halls. I whispered in the dreams of your fathers before you had beard or name. I am the Night Sire, the shadow beneath the roots of the world, and all who delve too deep belong to me." The torches sputtered and went out. Only the faint red glow from the crystal remained, painting the walls with a sickly light. Behind Dwalin, Ofar began to murmur an old dwarven prayer, a song to Aula the Maker, low and rhythmic. The words steadied them, even as the air grew colder and heavier. Dwalin lifted his axe and stepped forward. "Then you shall have one more thing to remember. The day the sons of Durin struck back." He charged, and his shout echoed like thunder through the chamber. The others followed, their war cries shattering the silence. The Night Sire raised its staff, and the world exploded into chaos. Dark fire erupted from the ground, coiling upward like serpents. The stone beneath their feet buckled and cracked. Shadows rose in the shape of warriors, black silhouettes with eyes of flame, armed with ghostly blades. Dwalin met them head-on. His axe bit into the first shadow, scattering it like smoke. The second came from behind, its blade slicing through his cloak, but glancing off the mail beneath. Borin and Bofri fought back to back, their axes whirling. Sparks flew as steel met darkness. Tovi, though wounded, loosed arrow after arrow into the horde. Each shaft struck true, bursting the shadows like mist. But for every one that fell, two more took its place. Dwalin pressed forward, cutting through the mass toward the dais. The Night Sire's laughter filled the air, a sound that chilled the blood. "You cannot kill what has no flesh," it whispered. "You cannot silence the dark. It is in you already." "Then I'll bleed it out," Dwalin growled. He leapt onto the dais, swinging his axe with all his might. The blow struck the staff, shattering the crystal in a burst of blue fire. The cavern shook violently. The Night Sire staggered back, its veil torn away, and for an instant Dwalin saw its face. It was neither living nor dead, but something caught between. A hollow visage of ash and bone, the remnants of some long-forgotten king, twisted by shadow. "You think this victory will last?" it hissed. "Even now, my roots spread through the dark. Gundabad is mine. The North is mine. All things that sleep beneath stone are mine." Dwalin drove his axe deep into the dais. Cracks raced across the floor, and molten light burst from beneath. The chamber roared with fire and thunder. "Then I'll bury you with your kingdom," he shouted. The Night Sire screamed, its form unraveling in a storm of black flame. The shockwave threw Dwalin backward. He struck the ground hard, his axe clattering away. The others ran to him, dragging him to his feet as the walls began to crumble. "We must go," Ofar cried. The ceiling split open, raining shards of stone. A torrent of molten rock surged up from the fissures, devouring the dais where the Night Sire had stood. The entire mountain seemed to convulse, its ancient heart breaking apart. They ran, through falling debris, through smoke and fire. The corridors they had passed before were gone, twisted and collapsing. Only one way remained, a narrow tunnel leading upward, faintly lit by cracks of daylight far above. Behind them, the cavern roared as the molten flood rose higher. The air burned in their lungs. Dori stumbled, but Borin seized his arm and dragged him on. At last, they burst into the open air, out upon a narrow ledge high on Gundabad's face. The cold wind struck them like a hammer, yet it felt like freedom. Below, the mountain's flank glowed red as the forges and tunnels collapsed. Smoke and flame poured from its crown, and the sound of the Night Sire's scream carried on the wind, long, fading, and full of hate. They fell to the snow, gasping. The world was silent again. save for the distant thunder of the dying mountain. Dwalin sat upright, his beard singed, his face streaked with ash. He looked to the others, Tovi clutching his wound, Ofar murmuring thanks to the Maker, Borin and Bofri leaning on each other, blooded but alive. "We did it," Dori breathed. "By the stones we did it." Dwalin nodded slowly. "Aye," he said, "but the dark never dies, it only sleeps." He looked toward the north, where the horizon burned faintly under the morning sun. "We've wounded it, nothing more. The work is not done." The others said nothing, but each of them understood. They had seen too much to believe the danger ended. When at last they began their descent from the mountain, the wind carried away the ashes of Gundabad, scattering them across the snows. And deep beneath the ruined halls, far below where fire still burned, a faint pulse stirred once more, slow, patient, and waiting. But for that day, at least, Dwalin, son of Fundin, stood victorious. The night side of Gundabad had fallen, and the dwarves of Durin's line had reclaimed a measure of their ancient honor. And though grief weighed heavy on his heart for the comrades lost, there was pride as well. For in the deepest dark, they had kindled light again. So they turned their faces south, toward Erebor, where the mountain gleamed gold beneath the sun. The long road awaited them, and the north lay quiet for a time, but Dwalin knew that quiet was a fragile thing. Still, as the wind swept the snow from the peaks and carried the scent of dawn, he allowed himself a rare smile. For even the deepest night must bow to the hammer's fire, and there are some hearts in Middle-earth that darkness cannot claim. Snow swept down from the high ridges as the company made their slow descent from Gundabad. The mountain burned behind them, its dark crown shrouded in smoke. Where once black forges had glowed beneath the peak, now only fire and ruin remained. The air trembled with the echoes of what they had unleashed, stone collapsing into the depths, and the fading cry of the night sire carried upon the wind. For a long time, none spoke. Their hearts were heavy, for Bruni was gone, lost in the fire below, and the victory they carried was bitter as old iron. Yet there was life in them still, and the will to endure. That, Dwalin thought, was enough. They made camp that night upon a wind-swept plateau, where a small stream cut through the rock, frozen to glass. They built no fire. The wind would have scattered it, and besides, the glow of Gundabad's ruin lit the sky like a false dawn. The mountain's reflection burned in the ice, crimson and gold. Ofar sat wrapped in his cloak, his old eyes fixed upon the firelight above. "I never thought to see that day," he said softly. "Gundabad aflame, the north avenged at last." "Avenged, maybe," Dwalin replied, "but not yet won. Evil buried is not evil ended. There's something in that mountain that will not die easy." Tovi, his arm bound in linen, shifted where he sat. "You mean the Night Sire?" Dwalin nodded. "Aye. I struck it down, but the thing's roots go deep. The dark has many names, many forms. Cut off one hand, and another stirs somewhere else." For a time they sat in silence, listening to the wind sigh over the rocks. Borin and Bofri took turns sharpening their axes, though neither had the strength to use them. Dori lay sleeping beside them, his breath shallow but steady. At length Ofar turned to Dwalin. "What will you do now, son of Fundin? Erebor lies far to the south. You've earned your rest." Dwalin looked toward the shadowed horizon, where the stars flickered faintly between clouds. "Rest comes when the work is done," he said. "There are still orcs in these hills, still things that crawl from the dark places. The Night Sire's fall will not keep them silent for long. I'll see the northern roads clear before I turn my steps home." Ofar smiled faintly beneath his beard. "You are much like your king was, Thorin. Stubborn as stone." Dwalin's expression softened. "Aye," he said, "and as flawed, perhaps. But I'll not let our folk bleed again for my pride. This I do for all of Durin's house." When dawn came, pale and sharp, they rose and began the long march down the slopes. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and white. For days they traveled through the northern wilds, crossing ridges and valleys where no dwarf had walked in generations. They passed the remains of old fortifications, broken watchtowers, half-buried forges, the ruins of outposts that had once guarded the northern passes. Here and there they found carvings in the stone, runes weathered by time, marking the names of lost houses. Dwalin paused often to trace them with his fingers, whispering their words beneath his breath. At one such place, a small stone bridge spanning a frozen ravine, they found a cairn newly built. The stones were clean, and at its top rested a dwarven helm, split by an axe blow, but polished bright. Borin crouched beside it. "This wasn't made by orcs." "No," Dwalin said. "By some of ours, then. Survivors, maybe, or wanderers from the Iron Hills. Whoever they were, they still keep the old ways." He added a single stone to the cairn and bowed his head. "May your forges burn warm, brother, wherever you dwell now." They moved on, following the river southward. The land grew less cruel as the days passed, though the memory of Gundabad's shadow never left their minds. At night, Dwalin often dreamed of the Night Sire's voice, soft and endless, whispering through the stone. Sometimes he would wake and find his hand clenched tight around the haft of his axe, as if he expected to see the dark robes before him once more. On the 7th day, as they crossed the foothills, a band of travelers met them upon the road. Dwarves of the Iron Hills, armored and stern. Their captain was a broad-shouldered warrior named Thorin, who saluted Dwalin with respect. "We were sent to seek the lost caravans," Thorin said. "But by the look of you, we've found more than we hoped. Is it true, then? Gundabad burns." "It burns," Dwalin said, "but don't think it's safe. There's dark work under those stones still. I'd not lead any company near it till the snows melt and the fires die." Thorin frowned. "And you? Will you return with us to the Iron Hills?" Dwalin shook his head. "Nay, my road runs east to Erebor. I must bring word to King Dain. He should know the north is not yet free." The Iron Hills company shared their food and offered them ponies for the road. When they parted, Thorin clasped Dwalin's arm. "If ever the call comes again, you'll find us ready. The sons of Durin are not so few as they once were." "Aye," Dwalin said, "but we'll need every hand before the end." That night they rode beneath a cold moon. The land fell away behind them, and the peaks of Gundabad faded into the mist. By morning, they reached the rolling plains that led toward Dale. The air there was softer, and the sun rose bright for the first time in many days. When at last they came within sight of the lonely mountain, its golden crown glimmering against the pale sky, Dwalin felt the weight of all his years. He had left it as a soldier. Now he returned a survivor, bearing both victory and sorrow. Erebor's gates opened to receive them. Word of their return spread swiftly through the halls, and soon King Dain himself came down from the throne room to greet them. His beard was silvered with age, but his eyes were sharp as ever. "You've been gone long, Dwalin," he said. "Long enough that we feared the north had swallowed you." "It nearly did," Dwalin answered. He bowed his head in respect. "But Gundabad will trouble us no more, for now. The forges are broken, the orcs scattered. Yet I fear the darkness there was more than flesh and blood. A spirit dwelled beneath that mountain, bold and cruel. It may rise again if left unchecked. Dain's face grew grave. A spirit? Do you mean a wraith? Something akin to it, Dwalin said. Not of Sauron's making, I think, but older. The Night Sire, it called itself. It ruled the orcs with fear and fire. We slew it, buried it beneath molten stone. But such things have a way of returning. The king's gaze hardened. Then we shall keep watch. You've done more than any could ask, son of Fundin. Erebor will not forget this deed. Dwalin inclined his head, but said nothing. He looked toward the great forge halls, where sparks still flew, and the sound of hammers rang like distant thunder. There was life in the mountain once more, and that was comfort enough. Yet when the night came and the fires dimmed, Dwalin walked alone through the quiet corridors. His steps echoed softly on the stone. He paused before Thorin's tomb, where the Arkenstone gleamed faintly under its glass dome. "My king," he said quietly, "we've kept your oath. The north is cleansed for now. But I wonder, how long before the dark stirs again? How many more battles must we fight before peace holds?" The stone gave no answer. Only the hum of the mountain replied, low and deep, like the breath of something vast sleeping beneath. Dwalin laid his hand upon the cold marble. "If it comes again, we'll be ready," he whispered. "Durin's line still stands, the fire still burns." Then he turned away, and the hall swallowed his footsteps. Outside, the wind carried the scent of winter and far-off smoke. The stars shone clear above Erebor, bright and unbroken. Yet far to the north, beyond sight, the ruins of Gundabad still smouldered, and deep under its ashes, unseen, a faint glimmer pulsed once more, like the echo of a heartbeat in stone. For in Middle-earth, no darkness dies forever, but neither does the courage of those who stand against it. Winter deepened over the north, and though the fires of Gundabad had faded to embers beneath the snow, their smoke seemed still to cling to the sky. Weeks passed in Erebor, and peace returned, at least in name. The forges burned bright, and trade flowed again through the halls of Dale. Yet Dwalin found no rest in the stone halls he had fought to reclaim. His sleep was uneasy, filled with dreams of shadow and whispering flame. At times, he thought he heard the voice again, the same hollow tone that had spoken beneath Gundabad. It came faintly in the forge's roar, or the wind that howled through the gates at dusk. "The dark is patient," it would murmur. "Stone remembers." So when word came from the north of strange sightings along the mountain passes, lights moving at night, sounds of drums echoing where no dwarf should be, Dwalin was the first to rise. He gathered a small company once more, though this time it was not of warriors, but of scouts and builders, folk skilled in stonework and in the reading of the earth. "We'll not seek battle," he told King Dain, "but knowledge. If Gundabad stirs again, better to know it soon than late." Dain nodded gravely. "Go then, but take care. The mountain stands firm, yet the north is treacherous. If the dark sleeps, do not wake it." Thus Dwalin set forth again, leading 6 dwarves northward, along the old road that ran between the grey mountains and the misty range. The air was keen and cold, and their breath steamed before them as they trudged through snow. For many days, they saw no sign of life. The valleys lay hushed beneath frost, and even the wolves were silent. But one night, as they camped beneath the shelter of an overhang, they saw a flicker of red upon the northern horizon. Too steady for lightning, too faint for dawn. "That's no storm," murmured one of the scouts. "It's fire." Dwalin's eyes narrowed. Aye, but who lights fire in that cursed land? The next morning, they set their faces north once more. As they neared the foothills, they began to find traces of passage, tracks in the snow, deep and many. Orc prints, but mixed among them others, smaller, lighter. Goblins, perhaps, or something worse. At last, they came upon a gorge that opened like a wound in the mountainside. The air that flowed from it was hot, though snow lay heavy upon the ground. From within came a faint, pulsing glow, as if the mountain's heart still beat. "This is it," Dwalin said. "The fire that will not die." They descended into the gorge. The walls were steep, veined with black rock that shimmered faintly. Strange symbols were scratched into the stone, runes of no known hand, their edges sharp as claws. At the gorge's end, they found a cleft that led into the mountain. The passage was narrow and rough, but warm air poured from it, and far within, the dull light flickered red. Dwalin took a deep breath. "Torches out," he whispered. "We'll see by their light alone." The dwarves crept forward in silence. The tunnel sloped downward for many paces before opening suddenly into a wide cavern. There, upon the floor, they saw a sight that froze their blood. The forge fires of Gundabad burned again. The chamber was smaller than the great halls Dwalin had seen before, yet its purpose was clear. A ring of molten stone circled a central pit, and around it worked a dozen figures, orcs and goblins, toiling in silence. Their movements were mechanical, almost lifeless, and at the center, rising from the molten ring like a black flower, stood an iron altar. Upon it glowed a shard of crystal, small, pale and pulsing faintly with the same sick light Dwalin remembered. "The Night Sire's heart," he breathed. Even as he spoke, one of the goblins turned, its eyes dull and colorless. For an instant it seemed blind, but then its gaze fixed upon them, and a shriek tore through the hall. "Down!" Dwalin shouted. Arrows whistled from the shadows, striking the rock where they had stood. The dwarves scattered for cover. Steel rang as the orcs charged. The air filled with the clash of blades and the stench of burning oil. Dwalin met the first with his axe, cleaving through helm and skull in one stroke. But these foes were strange. They did not cry out or falter when wounded. They fought without fear, without pain, as if driven by some force not their own. "Fall back to the tunnel," cried one of the scouts. "We can't hold here." "Not yet," Dwalin roared, his eyes fixed upon the altar. "That crystal, destroy it. That's what binds them." He fought his way forward, each step a battle. Arrows grazed his armor, and an orc's blade caught his shoulder. But he did not stop. With a final leap, he reached the altar and swung his axe down. The blow struck the crystal square, splitting it with a sharp crack. A burst of pale light filled the cavern. The orcs froze mid-motion, their weapons falling from lifeless hands. For a heartbeat, all was still. Then the crystal shattered completely, and a wave of fire rushed outward, knocking Dwalin from his feet. He hit the ground hard, the world spinning. When his vision cleared, the cavern was collapsing. The molten ring had burst, sending rivers of fire spilling across the floor. The others were shouting, dragging him toward the tunnel. They escaped just as the mountain groaned and sealed itself with a thunderous crash. The ground shuddered beneath them, and a blast of hot air hurled them into the snow outside. When the roar had faded, they rose slowly. The gorge behind them was gone, buried beneath smoke and ash. "Is it over?" asked one of the scouts, his voice hoarse. Dwalin looked to the horizon. The red glow was gone, swallowed by the pale light of dawn. "Aye," he said, "for now." They made their way south again, weary and scarred. None spoke much on the journey. Each knew what they had seen, and none wished to give the memory voice. When at last the lonely mountain rose before them again, Dwalin felt both relief and sorrow. He had cut out another piece of the darkness, but he knew the wound went deeper still. King Dain received them once more in his hall. When Dwalin spoke of the crystal and the reawakened fires, the king's brow darkened. "Then the curse of Gundabad runs deeper than we feared," he said. "But you have done well, son of Fundin. Twice you have brought light to places long lost." Dwalin bowed, but his thoughts were far away. "Light fades, my king, if none stand to guard it. I'll not lay down my axe while the north still breathes shadow." That night, as the others feasted in celebration, Dwalin stood upon the ramparts of Erebor. The wind was sharp, carrying the scent of snow and iron. He looked north, toward the unseen mountains where the fires had died. There, in the distance, the stars seemed to flicker strangely. 1, 2, then gone. A trick of the wind, perhaps, or perhaps not. He tightened his grip on the axe at his side. "Let the dark come," he murmured. "We'll meet it, hammer for hammer, till the last forge goes cold." And in the depths of the world, far beneath stone and shadow, something ancient stirred once more, whispering through the rock in a voice that only the mountains could hear. The war for the north was not ended. It had only begun. Spring crept slowly into the north. The snows melted in glittering rivulets down the slopes of Erebor, and the forges sang again with the sound of hammer on anvil. In Dale, merchants filled the streets with laughter and trade, and for a while the world seemed healed. Yet Dwalin felt no peace in his heart. The dreams had not left him. Each night he saw the same vision, a shadowed hall deep beneath the earth, where molten rivers coiled like serpents, and a voice, cold as iron, whispered from beyond the dark. "Stone remembers. Fire endures." He would wake drenched in sweat, his hand reaching for his axe before he remembered where he was. Even the golden glow of the mountain could not drive away the echo of that voice. Then came tidings from the west. A company of dwarves from the Blue Mountains arrived at Erebor, travelers and traders by look, though their faces were grim and weary. Their leader, an aged dwarf named Rowan, sought audience with King Dain at once. Dwalin was summoned to stand beside the throne, for he knew the northern ways better than most. When Rowan entered, his cloak was torn by long travel, and his beard was streaked with frost. He bowed deeply before Dain and spoke with urgency. "My lord, I bring warning from the far west. There is unrest beneath the Ered Luin. The old mines stir with strange sounds, drums and whispers in the deeps. We thought it but the earth settling after long years, but now miners vanish without trace. The tunnels smell of ash and cold fire, and some say they've seen eyes in the dark." Dain's brow furrowed. "The west, too?" he said grimly. "Is there no end to these shadows?" Rowan nodded. "We sealed the lower ways for now, but the earth burns beneath our feet. It feels alive." At that, Dwalin stepped forward. "It's the same voice," he said. "The same fire that moved in Gundabad, the Night Sire's echo, spreading through the roots of the world." Dain turned to him, his face grave. "You're certain?" "I've seen its work," Dwalin replied. "It cannot die easily. When we broke its crystal heart, we only scattered its spirit. Now it creeps through the stone, seeking new forges to claim." The king rose from his seat. "Then we cannot stand idle. If the darkness spreads, it will find us in time. Erebor's strength must not wane." He turned to Dwalin. "Will you go again, son of Fundin? To the west this time, to the Blue Mountains. Find the truth of these rumors and see if what plagues them is kin to what you fought in the north." Dwalin bowed. "I will go." The dark may run deep, but so do the dwarves. 2 days later, he set out. He took with him 4 companions. Tovi, now healed of his wound. Ofar, old but steadfast. And the twins, Borin and Bofri, who would not let him travel without their laughter at his side. Together they journeyed westward, crossing Dale and the Greenwood, where spring blossoms shone beneath the eaves. They followed the river running until it met the plains beyond, and there turned their steps toward the distant blue shadow of the mountains. It was a long road. They passed through lands still scarred by the war with the dragon and the armies of the east. Villages rebuilt with rough timbers stood where ashes had been, and though men greeted them kindly, there was fear in their eyes when talk turned to the deep places of the earth. Folk say there are tremors under the hills, one old man told them in a wayside tavern, and strange lights seen in the night. The ground moans sometimes, like something waking far below. Dwalin thanked him, but spoke little after. The same signs, the same omens, the fire creeping west. After many weeks, they came to the foothills of the Blue Mountains. The peaks loomed vast and cold, their ridges shining white beneath a silver sky. Smoke rose from the chimneys of dwarven halls built along the slopes. But even from afar, Dwalin sensed unease. The clang of hammers was duller here, the air heavy with a faint smell of brimstone. At the gate of the main hold, Baraz Dum, they called it, Rowan met them once more. His face was lined with worry. "You came swiftly, friends. The troubles worsened. 2 more miners vanished since we last spoke. We sealed the 3rd shaft yesterday, but the fire below won't stay buried." "Show me," Dwalin said. They followed Rowan through the deep halls of Baraz Dum, where veins of copper and silver gleamed faintly in the torchlight. The sound of hammers echoed distantly, but it was a hollow sound, as though the mountain no longer rejoiced in its making. At last they reached the sealed shaft, a vast iron door barred with chains and runes of warding. Even so, heat radiated from the cracks, and faint whispers seemed to seep through the metal, a language none could name. Ofar laid his hand upon the door and drew back quickly, his face pale. "It's alive," he murmured. "The stone burns beneath the runes." Borin frowned. "We should not open it." "We will not," Dwalin said. "Not yet." He turned to Rowan. "Tell me, did anything strange happen before this began? A new vein struck, an old tunnel reopened?" Rowan hesitated, then nodded. "Aye. The miners broke through to an ancient chamber 2 months past. A great hall sealed off since Doran's day. There was a forge there, long cold, but still whole. They swore they found no evil thing within. But after that, the fires woke." Dwalin's expression darkened. The Night Sire's seed. It found a new hearth. They spent that night in council, gathered in the old feast hall of Baraz Dum. Plans were laid, and runes studied. At last, Dwalin rose. "Tomorrow," he said, "we go down. Not to reopen the forge, but to end it. We'll bury that hall, collapse the roots if we must. If the Night Sire lives there, we'll drown it in stone." The next morning dawned grey and cold. The dwarves armed themselves, not for war, but for labor. Picks, hammers, and rune stones they bore, along with the heavy charges of blasting powder used to break the mountain's heart. They descended into the deeps by an old lift of chains and gears. The air grew hotter as they went down, the smell of sulfur thick. At last they reached the lower halls, tunnels black with soot, the walls trembling faintly as if something vast moved beneath. When they reached the sealed forge chamber, Dwalin gave the word, and the door was unbarred. A gust of air burst forth, hot, foul, and whispering. The hall beyond was lit by a dull red glow. At its center, stood the old forge, cracked and blackened, but within the cracks burned embers that would not die. The dwarves stepped inside, and at once the whispers rose, filling the air like the hiss of steam. The molten veins pulsed, and shapes moved in the shadows, faint, half-seen, like spirits caught between fire and smoke. "Back!" cried Tovi, raising his bow. "They're rising!" Dwalin lifted his axe. "Hold the line! Destroy the forge!" They struck the pillars with hammer and powder, the mountain shaking under each blow. Fire poured from the cracks, screaming as if alive. The shadow shapes lunged, their eyes burning with hate, but the dwarves fought fiercely, driving them back blow for blow. At last, Dwalin leapt onto the forge itself. "By Durin's hand!" he roared, and brought his axe down. The stone split, and a torrent of molten flame erupted upward, swallowing the hall in red light. They fled as the tunnels collapsed behind them. The roar of falling rock chased them up the shaft. When at last they burst into daylight, the mountain quaked, and smoke poured from the vents like the breath of a dying beast. The fire was quenched. The forge was gone. That night, as they stood beneath the stars, Rowan clasped Dwalin's arm. "You've saved us," he said. Again. Dwalin shook his head. "Not saved. Delayed. The Night Sire's fire runs deep. We can fight it where it shows, but until we find its root, the dark will rise again." He turned his gaze east, toward Erebor, far beyond the plains. The wind carried a faint scent of ash, though the sky was clear. "The mountains whisper," he said softly, "and I fear they whisper the same name." Far below, in the shattered deeps of the Blue Mountains, a single ember glowed amid the ashes, pale, patient, waiting for breath. The spring storms came late that year. Cold rain swept the plains east of the Blue Mountains, and the rivers ran wild with meltwater from the peaks. Dwalin and his companions lingered a short while in Barad-dûm, helping the folk there shore up the tunnels that had not collapsed. Though the great forge was gone, the mountain's roots still shuddered at times, as if uneasy in its sleep. At the gate one morning, Rowan met Dwalin and pressed into his hands a small bundle wrapped in leather. "From the wreck of the lower halls," he said. "We found this among the ash. I thought it best brought to you." Dwalin unwrapped it carefully. Within lay a shard of stone no larger than a man's thumb, black and faintly luminous, as if it drank the light instead of reflecting it. A crescent mark was etched upon its surface, tiny yet sharp enough to cut. Borin scowled. "By the hammers, not again. That's the same mark from Gundabad." "A fragment of the Night Sire's craft," Dwalin murmured. "A seed from the fire that won't die." He wrapped it once more and tucked it into his pouch. Best not leave such things where chance may find them. They took their leave soon after. The folk of Barad-dûm stood at the gates to see them off, singing old songs of thanks that echoed through the mountain wind. Then Dwalin and his company turned eastward once more, bound for Erebor. The road was long, and though the fields had begun to green, the skies stayed heavy with rain. For many days they marched, their boots sinking into the sodden earth, the peaks of the Blue Mountains fading behind them, like a dream half forgotten. They passed through old dwarven way stations, empty halls carved into lonely hills, and each night the fire burned lower, as though the weight of what they had seen pressed down upon them. One evening, as they camped beside a wide river, swollen with spring flood, Ofar spoke softly. "You've walked the length of the north now, Dwalin, fought its fires and shadows both. What think you truly? Can this evil be slain, or does it simply wait between the stones?" Dwalin stared into the flame. "When I was young," he said, "I thought evil was like a foe upon the field. Kill it and the battle's done. But the dark is not so simple. It lies in the hearts of those who dig too deep, who listen to whispers when the world above grows cold. The Night Sire is more than a spirit. It's hunger itself, and hunger never dies. Ophir nodded slowly. Then we must starve it, not fight it. Aye, Dwalin said. Seal every door it might creep through. Bury every forge it might claim. That is our war now. The fire cracked softly, and for a time none spoke again. The river roared nearby, swollen and angry, carrying trees and ice in its current. Above them the clouds shifted, and faint starlight broke through, cold and clean. The next day dawned with pale light. They broke camp early and followed the river south, where it curved toward the plains of Rovanion. There they crossed paths with men of Dale, hunters and merchants bound west. They greeted the dwarves warmly, but one of them, a weathered man named Garin, had troubling tidings. The earth's been shaking in the east, he said, in the red hills beyond the running river. Strange smoke rises at night, though there's no mine nor fire there. The ground's cracked in places, warm to the touch. Some say the world beneath is waking. Dwalin felt a cold weight settle in his chest. The red hills, he repeated. Aye, that's close. Too close. He thanked the man and moved on, but the thought gnawed at him all that day. If the fire had spread west to the Blue Mountains and east toward the river running, then perhaps it was not confined at all. Perhaps it moved beneath all of Middle-earth, threading through the roots of stone like veins of molten blood. When at last they came within sight of Erebor again, the mountain shone golden in the evening light. Smoke rose peacefully from its forges, and banners fluttered above its gates. It looked unchanged, eternal. Yet as Dwalin gazed upon it, he wondered how deep the foundations truly went, and what might be stirring below even this sacred stone. King Dain welcomed them in the great hall. His beard had grown whiter since Dwalin last saw him, but his eyes still shone with the iron will of Durin's line. When Dwalin laid the black shard before him, the hall fell silent. This, Dwalin said, we found in the wreck of Barad-dûm. It bears the mark of the Night Sire. The fire's still spreading, my king. I fear it moves through the world like a sickness. Dain studied the shard long, saying nothing. Then he gestured to his runesmith, who carried it away with careful hands. We will keep it sealed, he said at last. Far beneath the treasury, in stone wards laid by our oldest lore-masters. But your words trouble me, Dwalin. The mountains whisper again. Even here, I've heard it said that the deep forges have grown restless of late. Then we must act, Dwalin replied. Seal the lower halls. Send word to every hold of Durin's folk, from the Iron Hills to the far west. Let none delve deeper till this curse is ended. Dain nodded slowly. You speak wisely. Yet even wisdom may not save us if the darkness lies in the bones of the world. Still we will stand, as our fathers did. So the king gave orders, and messengers were sent. The lower ways of Erebor were sealed with rune and iron. Dwalin himself oversaw the closing of the old forges, where the heat ran strongest, and where once the gold of Smaug's hoard had flowed like rivers. The dwarves grumbled at first, for they loved the deep places, but they obeyed. None wished to tempt the fate that had befallen Gundabad or Barad-dûm. For a while, peace held. The halls rang with music again, and the trade caravans from Dale and the Iron Hills filled the courtyards. Yet Dwalin could not rest. Sometimes, walking the lower galleries by torchlight, he thought he heard it again. The faint thrum beneath the stone, like a heartbeat, too slow to be human. Then came the night when the fire returned. It began with a tremor that rattled the chains of the great gates. Then a low moan rolled through the mountain, deep and hollow. The forges flared white-hot, though no bellows stirred them. Sparks burst from the chimneys, streaking the sky. Dwalin was first to the lower halls, his axe in hand. There, in the shadows beyond the sealed forges, the runes on the iron doors were burning crimson. The stone around them steamed and cracked, and from beyond came the faint sound of laughter. Soft, endless, familiar. "The Night Sire," he whispered. The others came running, but before they could act, the central door split down the middle with a thunderous crack. A rush of flame poured forth, twisting like a living thing. Within it, for an instant, Dwalin saw the shape of a face, ashen, crowned with fire, smiling through the blaze. He raised his axe and shouted, "To arms! Sound the bells! Erebor stands or falls tonight!" The alarm rang through the mountain. Dwarves poured from every hall, their weapons gleaming, their war cries rising to meet the fire. And in that hour, beneath the lonely mountain, the battle for the heart of Durin's realm began. The bells of Erebor tolled, as they hadn't tolled since the days of Smaug. Their thunder rolled through the deep caverns and along the mountain's crown, ringing over the snows and echoing into the night. Every dwarf in the kingdom heard that sound, and all knew its meaning. Erebor was under siege. Dwalin stood in the lower halls where the fire had broken through. Smoke and heat rolled around him, and his beard was singed at the ends. The runed doors that had held the deep forges were gone, melted into slag that ran like dark water across the stone. In their place gaped a wound in the mountain, glowing with living flame. "Form the line," he shouted. "Shields to the front, axes high, do not yield the hall." Scores of dwarves rallied to him, armor glinting in the firelight. The clang of steel filled the air. From the rent in the mountain came a roar, not of beast nor wind, but of the mountain itself. Fire burst forth in a sheet, and within its light, shapes began to form. They were not orcs this time. They were born of ash and molten stone, figures of fire, their eyes white as the forge's heart. They moved with a terrible grace, as if bound by the will of something unseen. "By Durin!" cried Bofri. "What are they?" "Remnants," Dwalin said grimly. "The Night Sire's forge-born." The creatures surged forward. Axes met flame, steel hissed as it bit through burning flesh that bled sparks. The dwarves held their ground, their battle cries shaking the halls. The air grew thick with smoke and heat, yet none gave way. For every creature that fell, two more took its place. Dwalin fought like one possessed, his axe flashing in arcs of silver light. He cleaved through the fire-born, striking down anything that came near. Yet the heat seared his lungs, and the ground trembled beneath his boots. Above, the alarm bells grew frantic. The mountain groaned from its depths, and cracks split the walls like veins of red. Dwarves poured down from the higher levels, bearing water and sand, their faces blackened with soot. Ofar reached Dwalin's side, coughing through the smoke. "The king commands us to fall back to the Hall of Feasts. The forges are lost. Lost or not, they'll not break through while I stand," Dwalin growled. "The mountain's collapsing." As if to answer, a thunderous crack split the air. The ceiling shuddered, and chunks of stone fell, crushing friend and foe alike. Flames surged higher. At last, Dwalin gave the signal. "Fall back! Seal the corridor behind us! Go!" They retreated up the passageways, dragging the wounded. Behind them, the fire-born pressed close, their howls echoing off the stone. Dwalin waited till the last of his kin had passed through the archway, then swung his axe against the supporting pillar. The weakened rock gave way, and the tunnel collapsed in a cloud of smoke and dust. Silence followed, brief and heavy. When the dust settled, they stood in the Hall of Feasts. The great pillars loomed like sentinels, their carved runes glowing faintly in the smoke. King Dwalin himself stood upon the dais, his crown blackened, his eyes fierce beneath his silver helm. "Report," he commanded. "The lower forges are gone," Dwalin said. "The fire runs through them like a living thing. We blocked the main passage, but it will not hold long." The king's face was grave. "Then we must hold here. This hall was built in Durin's time, carved from the heart rock itself. If the mountain stands, this place will endure." Dwalin shook his head. "Endure, aye, but for how long? This is no army of flesh. It's the mountain's anger made alive." At that, a low sound rose from below, a deep rumble, steady and growing. The floor trembled. The carved dishes upon the tables rattled and fell. Then came a voice, faint but clear, rising from the cracks between the stones. "You cannot bury what was born in fire, sons of stone. You have fed me with your forges, warmed me with your greed. I am the heart beneath the hammer. I am the night eternal." Dwalin's sword flashed from its scabbard. "Be silent, spirit. You are nothing but smoke and lies." The laughter that followed was cold as iron. "Then come, king under the mountain. Let us see which of us endures." The floor split apart, and flame erupted once more. Out of it rose a figure half-shaped of light and shadow, a tall being draped in fire, its face a mask of molten metal. The Night Sire had taken form again. "By the Maker," whispered Borin, "it lives." Dwalin stepped forward. "No," he said. "It endures, but we'll end it." The battle was joined anew. The dwarves formed their circle around the king, axes and hammers flashing in the firelight. The Night Sire moved through them like smoke, each step leaving scorched stone behind. When its hand swept outward, waves of flame rolled through the hall. Yet the dwarves held their ground. Dwalin met the creature, blow for blow, his sword wreathed in the blue glow of ancient runes. Dwalin struck from the flank, his axe biting deep into the creature's arm. Molten blood sprayed forth, hissing upon the stone. The Night Sire reeled back, its voice rising in fury. "You are but dust and will. You cannot kill the fire." "Then we'll bury it again," Dwalin roared. He looked to the ceiling, the heart of the hall, where the pillars met in a web of carved stone. "Borin, the runes of binding, break them." Borin and Bofri understood at once. They ran to the walls, their hammers striking the rune stones that held the upper vaults firm. One by one the symbols shattered, glowing blue as they failed. Cracks raced along the ceiling. Dust rained down. Dwalin saw their intent and shouted, "Out, all of you! Go!" But Dwalin did not move. He stood before the Night Sire, his armor smoking, his beard singed to ash. "This ends here," he said. "No more fire, no more forges, no more darkness beneath Durin's stone." The creature raised its hand, fire swirling. Dwalin charged, his axe lifted high. The two met in the center of the hall, stone and flame colliding. There was a blinding flash, a roar that shook the mountain to its roots. Then came silence. When the survivors looked back from the tunnels above, the Hall of Feasts was gone. In its place lay a ruin of broken stone, glowing faintly with dying embers. The fire had vanished. The mountain was quiet once more. For 3 days they searched the wreckage. Many had fallen, and among them no sign of Dwalin was found, neither body nor axe. Some said he had perished in the blast, others that the mountain had taken him, claiming its last defender. King Dwalin stood upon the ruins, his face lined with grief. "He held the dark at bay," he said. "Erebor stands because of him. Let this place be sealed. No forge shall burn here again." So it was done. The lower halls were closed forever. walled with stone thicker than any before. Songs were sung for Dwalin, son of Fundin, who had faced the Night Sire and vanished into legend. But in the deepest quiet of the mountain, far below where even the miners dared not go, a single ember glowed among the stones. It pulsed once, faintly, like the beat of a heart that refused to die. And in that hidden dark, a whisper stirred once more. Stone remembers. Summer passed slowly over the lonely mountain. The snows on the high ridges melted, and the fields of Dale turned green once more. To the world beyond, Erebor seemed strong and unbroken. The markets were busy again, the forges above still rang with steel, and King Dain held court as proudly as any ruler of Durin's line. Yet within the deep halls there lingered a silence that no hammer could break. The lower vaults remained sealed. No dwarf went near them, not even the miners who worked the veins higher in the rock. The stone there felt different, warmer, as if it held a slow, hidden breath. The dwarves whispered that Dwalin's sacrifice had quenched the fire but not destroyed it. Some said that the mountain mourned him. Others claimed that the spirit he had fought now slumbered beneath, dreaming in the dark. King Dain spoke little of that night. His beard had grown white, and his step had slowed, though his eyes were keen still. Often he would stand upon the high balcony overlooking the plains, gazing south toward Dale and beyond, as though searching for signs of something unseen. It was in those days that young Gimli, son of Glóin, came often to the king's hall. He had grown strong and broad-shouldered, his eyes bright with restless fire. He had heard every tale of the battle for the mountain, of Dwalin's last stand, and he longed to learn the truth of it. One evening he found Dain alone by the throne, the great chamber lit only by the red glow of the forges. "My lord," he said, bowing low, "I beg leave to ask of Dwalin. Some say he is dead, others that the mountain took him. Which is true?" Dain's gaze fell upon the youth, and he smiled faintly. "Both, perhaps," he said. Dwalin was a man of stone, hard, unyielding, bound to the earth. The fire could not claim him, nor the darkness consume him, but he walked too close to the deep places, and those who do seldom return. Gimli frowned. "Then you believe he lives still?" The king's eyes drifted toward the sealed gate far below. "If life it may be called, the mountain remembers his name. That is enough." After that, Gimli began to walk the lower halls alone, despite the warnings of the guards. He would pace the echoing corridors by torchlight, tracing the runes upon the walls, listening for any sound beyond the sealed stones. At times he thought he heard something, faint like a hammer striking far below. Once he laid his ear to the cold rock and fancied he caught a voice murmuring in the depths. But when he told the others, they laughed. "The wind in the shafts. Nothing more," they said. Still the dreams troubled him. He saw Dwalin in his sleep, standing before a vast forge, lit by ghostly fire, his eyes like burning coals. The old warrior would raise his axe, not in battle, but as though beckoning him onward. "Stone remembers," the dream voice whispered. "The hammer calls." One night, unable to bear it longer, Gimli went to the king. "My lord," he said, "something stirs beneath the mountain again. I have felt it." Dain's face grew grave. "Many have felt it, lad. The forges burn hotter each month, though we haven't stoked them. The walls sweat with warmth where none should be. But the doors will stay shut. I will not lose another son of Durin to that darkness." "Then let me go," Gimli said fiercely. "Let me see what lies beyond. If Dwalin yet lives, I will bring him home." The king shook his head. "No, you are too young, and the mountain is old and cruel. Let the dead keep their silence. But youth is stubborn, and Gimli's blood burned with the same fire that once drove Thorin's company into the wild. So it was that, on a night when the wind howled through the upper gates and the sentries slept by their lanterns, Gimli took his axe and a single torch and went down into the deep halls. The passageways were cold and still. Dust hung thick in the air, stirred only by his steps. He came at last to the sealed door, a massive slab of iron set in stone, runes of binding etched across its face. The air there was warmer, and his torch flickered, though no draught touched it. He placed his hand upon the metal. It throbbed faintly, as though something beneath was alive. "Dwalin," he whispered. A sound answered him, soft, distant, like a sigh. The runes glimmered red for a heartbeat, then went dark again. Gimli stepped back, startled. The sigh came again, louder now, rising into a low hum. Cracks traced across the iron, glowing faintly. The door began to tremble. "By Auler's hammer," he breathed. "What have I done?" He turned to flee, but the air behind him changed. A wind, hot and dry, swept through the corridor. The torch in his hand flared blue, then went out, plunging him into darkness. From beyond the door came a deep, rhythmic pounding, as though a hammer struck stone from within. Then a voice spoke. Not in words, but in the heavy silence of his mind. "You woke me, son of Glóin." Gimli froze. The voice was Dwalin's, or near enough to make his blood run cold. "Who calls?" he whispered. "The fire is not gone. It sleeps within the stone. I hold it, but it strains against me. Do not open the door. Not now. Not ever." Gimli's knees trembled. "Dwalin, if it's you, come back. Erebor needs you." A pause. Then, "Erebor stands because I do not. Go, lad. Tell the king the Night Sire stirs still, but while I breathe, it cannot rise." The pounding grew louder, the heat fiercer. The cracks glowed white. Gimli stumbled backward, shielding his face. "Dwalin," he cried again. But the voice came no more. With a thunderous boom, the iron sealed itself, the runes burning bright gold before fading once more to grey. The heat vanished. The silence returned. When Gimli reached the upper halls, his beard was singed, his face pale with fear. He told King Dain what he had heard, but the old dwarf only nodded. "So it is true," Dain murmured. "He stands guard still, in the heart of the mountain." "Then we must free him," Gimli cried. "No," said Dain softly. "To free him is to free the fire. Better a single soul bound forever than the world burned anew. He chose his fate, as we all must." The king ordered the lower gates sealed anew, and no dwarf was ever again permitted to walk those passages. But among the folk of Erebor, the story spread, of Dwalin the Fire Warden, who fought the Night Sire beneath the stone and became its eternal watchman. And in the deepest watches of the night, when the forges of Erebor glowed low and the mountain's heart beat slow and steady, some claimed to hear it still, the faint ring of a hammer striking in the depths, as if one lone warrior still labored to keep the darkness at bay. Thus the name of Dwalin was added to the long songs of Durin's folk, and his tale passed into legend. Yet deep under the mountain, in the place where stone meets flame, a shadow flickered and waited. The fire had not forgotten its master, nor had it forgiven. Years rolled by like the turning of a great wheel. The snows came and went upon the lonely mountain, and still the dwarves of Erebor toiled and thrived. Yet deep within the rock, where the sun had never shone, and time itself seemed to sleep, something ancient stirred in silence. King Dain grew old, and the strength of his youth waned. His son Thorin III, whom the dwarves called Stonehelm, rose to rule beside him, a warrior wise and steadfast. The peace of Erebor endured through many seasons, and men and dwarves alike began to speak of the mountain as unbreakable once more. But Dwalin, in the solitude of his final years, was haunted by the same thought that had troubled him since the night Dwalin vanished. Was the fire truly gone? On his last evening, he called for Gimli. The young dwarf had grown broad of shoulder and deep of voice, his eyes alight with courage and wisdom both. He came at once, kneeling before the king's bed. "My time draws near," said Dwalin quietly, "but there is one charge I would leave you before I go. Do you still dream of the lower halls?" Gimli bowed his head. "I have not forgotten them, sire. The mountain speaks to me sometimes. In my sleep, I hear the hammers ring." Dwalin's eyes flickered with both sorrow and pride. "Aye, the hammer rings yet. And while it rings, Erebor stands. Dwalin holds the darkness still. You must remember that, whatever comes." "I will, my king." "Good," Dwalin murmured. "But remember also this. Should the mountain fall silent, it will not be from peace, but from victory or ruin. Pray that you never hear the quiet." Those were the last words Dwalin Ironfoot spoke. He died before dawn, and his son was crowned in the Golden Hall. The bells rang, and feasting filled the mountain. Yet even amid the joy, Gimli felt the weight of his promise. Seasons passed. Word came from the south of a new power stirring, the return of the shadow in the east, the rebuilding of dark armies under banners that had not flown since the days of Sauron. Rumor spoke of the ring once more, and of war brewing across all lands. When the messenger from Rivendell came to Erebor, Gimli was among those who listened as King Stonehelm read the tidings aloud. He heard then of a council soon to be held in the house of Elrond, where the fate of all free folk might be decided. "I will go," Gimli said. "The dwarves must have a voice in this council." Stonehelm nodded. "Then go with honor, son of Glóin. Speak wisely, and return swiftly. Erebor's heart is yours if you need it." So Gimli departed the mountain with a small company, among them his father, Glóin. They journeyed far, across leagues of wild land, until they came to the hidden valley where Elrond dwelt. There, in the house of Rivendell, he met those who would later shape the fate of Middle-earth: the wizard Gandalf, the elf Legolas, the man Aragorn, and Frodo the Ring-bearer. But even in that fair valley, Gimli's thoughts often wandered homeward. The mountains to the east seemed to whisper to him at night, faint and low. Stone remembers. When the Fellowship was formed and the Nine set forth on their perilous road, Gimli carried more than his axe and shield. He bore the memory of Dwalin, the Fire Warden, who still labored beneath the lonely mountain to keep the darkness chained. Long months passed. Through mines and forests, over rivers and plains, Gimli fought beside his companions. He learned to trust the elf, to love the hobbits, and to follow Aragorn's lead. Yet in every cavern they crossed, in every dark hollow where the earth's breath whispered through unseen cracks, he felt the same unease, the same pulse beneath the stone. And one night, while they rested in the deep woods of Fangorn, Gimli dreamt again. He stood in a great hall of molten gold. Before him blazed a forge vast as the world, and at its center labored a single figure, black against the fire. The hammer fell again and again, steady as a heartbeat. "Dwalin!" Gimli called. The figure turned. For a moment he saw the old warrior's face, stern and proud, but behind his eyes burned a light not of life. "The chain weakens," Dwalin said. "The Night Sire strains. The fire seeks its path to the world above. Tell them. Tell Durin's sons, the forges must sleep." Then the vision shattered in flame. and Gimli woke, sweating in the dark. When the War of the Ring ended and the darkness in the east was broken, Gimli returned at last to Erebor. There he found the halls unchanged, the gold bright, the forges warm, and laughter ringing once more. But the words of his dream gave him no rest. He sought out King Stonehelm and told him all. The king listened gravely. "The mountain has been quiet these many years," he said. "No tremor, no flame. Perhaps the danger has passed." Gimli shook his head. "No, the fire sleeps, but it is not gone. The deeper forges must be quenched for good. Let them lie cold. The days of delving below the roots are ended." Stonehelm pondered long, then agreed. The deepest furnaces were sealed forever, and the dwarves turned their craft to the upper halls. Many grumbled, for it went against their nature to leave stone unexplored, but none dared defy the memory of Dwalin. Years later, when Gimli himself became lord of the glittering caves in Rohan, he often spoke to his people of the fire that sleeps beneath stone. "There are some forges that should never burn again," he would say. "We are makers, not masters. Remember that." And so it was that peace endured for a time in Erebor. Yet far below, deeper than any tunnel the dwarves had carved, beneath the bones of the mountain, where no pick had struck since the world was young, a faint red glow pulsed once more. There, surrounded by eternal stone, stood Dwalin. His beard was grey as ash, his armor fused with fire. In his hand, he still held the axe that had split the Night Sire's heart. Around him, the walls trembled with the breath of a slumbering flame. He raised his gaze toward the unseen heights above and whispered into the dark, "So long as I stand, the fire shall not rise. So long as stone remembers, Erebor shall endure." Then he turned back to the forge, lifted his hammer, and struck once more. A single, ringing note that echoed through every chamber of the mountain. Those who worked above paused, feeling the tremor in their bones. Some said it was the shifting of the earth. Others said it was the sound of the mountain's heart, still beating after all these years. And though few could name it, every dwarf who heard that echo straightened with pride, for they knew, somewhere deep below, one of Durin's sons still kept watch. The night side of Gundabad had fallen. The Blue Mountains had burned and been healed. But the oldest truth remained. Light and dark are never parted long. Yet, as long as courage endures in the hearts of those who dwell beneath stone, the darkness shall never wholly reign. For there, in the silence and the heat of the mountain's heart, Dwalin, son of Fundin, stood eternal, guardian of the forge, keeper of the fire, and the last sentinel of the deep. The age of peace in Erebor stretched long, but not endless. Years turned to decades, and the mountain's gold gleamed once more in every hall. The songs of the dwarves grew proud again, and laughter rang through the corridors. Trade flowed to Dale, and the forges roared day and night. In the glow of prosperity, the whispers of the Night Sire faded into half-remembered tales. Yet the stone never forgot. Deep beneath the lowest vaults, where the roots of Erebor wound like veins into the heart of the world, the ancient heat still lingered. It pulsed in secret, faint and slow, waiting for breath. And though none could hear it, the mountain sometimes sighed in its sleep. Gimli, son of Gloin, had long since departed for the west, to the lands beyond the sea, where it was said the undying shores lay. His people in the glittering caves kept his name in reverence, as those of Erebor did Dwalin's. Under King Stonehelm's rule, the realm flourished. But time, even for dwarves, is a patient sculptor, and new generations arose who did not remember the dark days of the Night Sire. Then one winter, a strange tremor passed beneath the mountain. It was faint no stronger than a heartbeat. But it came again the next night, and the next after that. At first, none paid heed. The forges burned too hot, the hammers fell too loud for such small warnings to be noticed. But by spring, miners began to speak of finding cracks in the lowest tunnels, as if something beneath were shifting. Stonehelm sent word to the craft lords to reinforce the supports, yet even as they worked, a faint red glow appeared between the seams of the rock, an ember's light, small but steady. The king grew uneasy. One night he gathered his captains in the great hall, the same where Dwalin once stood before Dine Ironfoot. The torches burned low, and the sound of the mountain's pulse thrummed beneath their feet. "You have all heard the tales," Stonehelm said, his voice deep and troubled. "The Night Sire's fire, Dwalin's watch, the sealing of the lower halls. Long has the mountain lain quiet, but now it stirs. I would know why." The captains looked one to another in silence. At last, an old dwarf named Hori, a scholar of the deep lore, spoke. "Sire," he said, "stone does not move without cause. The tremors we feel may be the old fire's breath returning. In the elder days, before even Durin awoke, it was said that the mountains themselves were born of the world's molten heart. The Night Sire may be no more than a name for that primeval flame. Or it may be something that should never have been woken," Stonehelm replied grimly. He ordered the deepest shafts sealed once more, but fear had already crept into the hearts of his people. Some whispered that the old guardian, Dwalin, no longer held his post, that his spirit had grown weary, and the fire he had bound was breaking free. The king sent a company of miners, led by his most trusted warden, Rek, son of Roin, to descend into the lower reaches and learn the truth. They went with torches and song, their hearts bold, for they were sons of the line of Durin and feared no darkness. For 3 days, no word came. Then, on the morning of the 4th, a single dwarf returned, face blackened, beard half-burned, his eyes wide with terror. "What did you see?" asked the king. The dwarf shuddered. "Light, my lord. Not fire, but light that moved like a living thing. It came from the very walls, red and white together, and it sang, it sang, a voice that was not of any forge or wind. It said the name of Dwalin." The hall fell silent. Stonehelm dismissed the others and sat long in thought. At last he rose, took his great hammer, and summoned his guard. "If there is truth in this," he said, "I will see it with my own eyes. The king of the mountain will not hide behind stone when his realm trembles." So it was that Stonehelm himself descended the forbidden stairs, with a score of warriors at his back. They went deep, through halls untouched for 100 years, past walls carved with runes that none alive could read. The air grew heavy and hot, and their torches burned with greenish flame. At length they came to the old gate of iron, the one that Gimli had sealed in his youth. It was cracked and blackened now, the runes dim and faded. From beyond came a steady glow, like the reflection of a forge fire. "Break it," the king commanded. They heaved with their hammers, and the gate fell inward with a groan that shook the earth. Beyond lay a vast chamber, hollow as the heart of the world. Rivers of molten stone ran through its floor, and above them hung a great forge, suspended by chains of black iron. And there, before the forge, stood Dwalin. He had not aged, yet neither did he seem wholly living. His armor was fused with the rock, his beard white as frost, and his eyes burned like twin embers. In his hands he still held his axe, the blade glowing faintly red. Stonehelm stepped forward, awe and fear upon him. "Dwalin, son of Fundin," he said. "Is it you?" The old warrior turned, and when he spoke, his voice was like the rumble of stone. "I am what remains. Long have I kept the fire bound, but the chain weakens." "Then we will strengthen it," said the king. "Tell us how." Dwalin's gaze swept the hall. "You cannot. The mountain lives. Its heart burns beneath all mountains. I have held it here as long as I could. But the world above has changed. The fires of war, of greed, of gold, they have fed it anew." Stonehelm's hand tightened on his hammer. "Then we will fight it, as you did." Dwalin shook his head. "No hammer can break it now. The fire must breathe, or it will tear the world apart. But hear me, king under the mountain. Do not let it reach the open air. Seal the mountain upon me. Let Erebor sleep. Only thus may it rest." The chamber quaked. The rivers of magma rose higher. Dwalin raised his axe, and the forge roared to life, its chains snapping one by one. "Go!" he thundered. "The time of keeping is done." Stonehelm hesitated. "We will not leave you. Go!" The fire flared, a wave of heat that drove them back. The king turned and fled with his warriors, the mountain shaking above them. As they reached the higher vaults, a roar like thunder split the air, and a pillar of flame shot upward from the depths. Then came silence. For 3 days the dwarves feared the mountain was lost. Smoke poured from its crown, and tremors shook the plains. But on the 4th morning, the fires died. The air cleared. Erebor stood, blackened but whole. Stonehelm ordered the lower halls sealed forever, and no dwarf ever saw Dwalin again. But when the forges were lit anew, their fires burned steadier than before, and the metal they shaped was stronger, purer, as if tempered by a hidden hand. The dwarves say that Dwalin's spirit became one with the stone, that he lies now within the mountain's heart, neither dead nor living, keeping the fire bound by his will. And sometimes, when the wind moans through the upper gates, it carries a low, steady rhythm, like a hammer striking deep below. The wise among Durin's folk pause when they hear it. They bow their heads and whisper, "Stone remembers." And the mountain, proud and eternal, whispers back. Autumn came once more to the lonely mountain, and the chill wind swept down from the withered heath, singing through the carved gates of Erebor. The years had turned, yet still the dwarves labored under their golden halls. The scars of the last awakening, of the fire that had nearly consumed them, had faded from the stone, but never from their hearts. King Stonehelm grew grey and weary with time, and though the mountain thrived under his rule, the shadow of the deep lay ever in his thoughts. He had not spoken of Dwalin's final command to many, but he had written it upon the secret tablets of the kings. Let the mountain sleep. So the lower vaults remained closed, their gates sealed in runes of iron. None went there now. Even the most daring of miners and smiths avoided the deep air, which was said to breathe hot on the skin like the sigh of some sleeping beast. The forges above burned bright enough, and there was wealth enough in the upper halls to fill 100 lifetimes. And yet, in the quiet hours before dawn, when the forges were cold and the halls lay hushed, the old guards upon the gate would swear they heard it, the sound of a hammer far below, slow and measured, like the beating of a heart. The youngest among them laughed, calling it fancy, but the elders knew better. They would bow their heads at that sound, whispering softly, "Dwalin, keeper of the fire, may your hand never falter." So it went for many long years, and Erebor prospered. Trade came again from Dale and from far Harad, and the dwarves grew rich and proud. The old songs were sung less often. Few remembered the night sire or the terror that had once risen from the dark. Then, on a night of bitter winter, when the stars hung clear and hard above the snows, the mountain trembled once more. It was not a great quake, only a shiver, subtle and short, but it ran through every stone, and every dwarf within the halls felt it. The torches flickered, the gold upon the walls seemed to darken, and for an instant the air grew warm as midsummer. Stonehelm was long dead by then, and his grandson Dorin held the crown. He was young, fierce and proud, too proud perhaps, for he had not seen the days when the mountain bled fire. When his captains came to him in fear, he laughed. "The earth shifts," he said. "What of it? The bones of the world are old. Let them move. No flame will break these walls." But among the court was an aged dwarf, Hoary, the Lotr keeper, last of those who had descended with Stonehelm to the deep chamber long ago. His beard was white as frost, his hands gnarled like roots, and his eyes dark with memory. "My king," he said quietly, "when the mountain stirs, it is not the world's bones that move, but its heart. You would do well to listen." Dorin frowned. "You speak of old ghosts, Master Lotr keeper. The fire is dead." "Fire does not die," Hoary murmured. "It waits." That night, while the king slept, Hoary took a lantern and went alone to the sealed gates of the lower halls. The guards tried to bar his way, but he spoke the old words of Dwalin, words few remembered, and the runes upon the iron doors flickered faintly in answer. He knelt before the stone and pressed his ear to it. The air was warm, and faintly, he heard it, a rhythm slow and steady, echoing through the deeps. One hammer strike, then another. A tear slid down the old dwarf's cheek. "He still stands," he whispered. "But he tires." When dawn came, he went to the king and told him what he had heard. "Let it be," said Dorin, uneasy now despite himself. "The past is sealed. None will open those doors while I reign." And so the years turned again. The tremors passed, the mountain quieted, and Erebor's people forgot once more. But Hoary did not forget. Each year, when the first snow fell upon the gates, he would come to the lower vaults and place a single silver coin upon the floor. "For the keeper," he would murmur. "May the fire stay bound." At last, age claimed him, and the mountain buried its oldest memory. The songs of gold grew louder than the songs of stone, and wealth filled the hearts of men and dwarves alike. It was then, when pride was greatest and vigilance least, that the whisper came again, not in dream or tremor, but in voice. It came first to the miners working near the roots of the mountain, where no heat should dwell. They heard it in the drip of water, in the echo of their own picks. "Stone remembers," it said. "Fire waits." They fled, casting down their tools, and the halls above were filled with fear once more. King Dorin called his council. "What is this madness?" he demanded. "Who dares speak of ghosts in my reign?" But even as he spoke, the mountain groaned, deep and mournful, and a faint light, red as dawn, flickered behind the cracks of the sealed gate. The council fell silent. "My lord," said one of the guards, voice trembling, "it is the same light our father saw in the days of the fire warden." Dorin rose, pale and shaken. "Then may the Maker forgive us," he said softly, "for we have forgotten our oaths." He ordered the forges quenched, and the halls emptied. The dwarves fled into the upper reaches, carrying only what they could bear. For 3 days the mountain trembled, and the sky above glowed red as blood. Yet no fire burst forth, no ruin came. On the 4th dawn, silence fell. When the bravest of the dwarves crept back, they found the sealed gate untouched, but upon its iron face, newly carved, were words that none had written. "The chain holds. Sleep, children of stone. the fire is not yet free. The runes were carved deep and straight, as only a dwarven hand could make them. Though none had passed that way for a century, King Dorin commanded that the words be gilded in silver, and that no dwarf ever again strike the earth beneath the mountain. From that day onward, the forges of Erebor burned cooler, their flames dimmer, yet their metal purer than ever before. The dwarves learned patience anew, and humility in their craft, and whenever thunder rolled across the sky, they said it was the echo of Dwalin's hammer, striking deep within the world to keep the darkness bound. Thus ended the tale of Dwalin, the Night Side, whose courage outlasted both death and time. The mountain he had saved still stands, proud and golden against the cold north wind. And in the silence beneath its roots, where fire and stone lie forever entwined, the keeper still watches, for the night may fall again, but so long as stone remembers, light will rise.